Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast Elevenses. It's Wednesday the 31st of May. It's a fairly overcast day here in London at the moment, quite bright, not particularly warm. The wind's coming off the North Sea, so it cools everything down a bit, but it should stay dry, and it's looking like a good week across a lot of the country, which is excellent, of course, if you happen to be out and about on a motorcycle today. So what have we got for you in today's shows? Well, as usual, plenty of motorcycle news from around the world, and some of my own views about what's going on in the world of two wheels. So what are we covering? Well, there's been a rival gang shootout in New Mexico, which has left 3 dead. The governor of Bali has taken the next step towards a total ban on foreigners driving on the island. If you want another ban rather closer to home, then look no further than Birmingham or Wolverhampton, where the street cruise injunction has been extended. Meanwhile, eye experts have revealed flaws in DVSA's vision guidance, and that looks set to be changed. The police in Cheshire are now able to check your visor to see if it has an illegal level of tint, and they can do that out on the road with a new gadget. We'll have a look at that. And finally, in the news section, we'll be looking at the new QJ Motor 700 adventure bike and are asking if it is actually the answer for bikers on a budget. And finally, today's discussion point, we'll look at the street cruise and we'll ask what exactly powers that the police have when they define something as a street cruise. So settle yourselves down for the next few minutes. Don't forget, if you've got a question, anything you want to ask, drop me a line. I'll get back to you if possible during the show. If I can't do it during the show, I'll certainly answer you after the show. Right, so on with the news. Now, the first thing that, as I said, we want to talk about is the incident out in New Mexico. Now, this is actually slightly alarming, really. Members of the Bandidos and the Water Dogs groups traded gunfire in a shootout between those rival motorbike gangs at a motorcycle rally in Red River, northern New Mexico on Saturday, May the 27th. Now, 3 gang members were killed during the shootout. 5 were wounded, police said. Of the 3 killed, 2 were Bandidos and 1 was a water dog. No bystanders were injured, which is a bit of a miracle, apparently, as the shootout happened on a crowded street. Now, Jacob Castillo, 30, a water dog from New Mexico, he's been charged with murder, whilst Matthew Jackson, 39, of Texas, a Bandidos chapter leader, he has faced a count of unlawful carrying of a firearm. And second Bandido, Christopher Garcia, 41, of Texas, he's been arrested on suspicion of possession of cocaine. Now, the confrontation apparently began some miles away in Albuquerque, which is New Mexico's largest city. The circumstances aren't entirely clear. The news report says something about a photograph involving another gang, whatever that means, but it then spilled over to the Red River annual Memorial Day motorcycle rally, with the shootout happening at around 5 o'clock in the evening on the packed Main Street. Now, some 28,000 bikers from across the country were expected to attend the Memorial Day rally, which is a big holiday for Americans, big ride-out day. It would feature live music, remembrance ceremonies at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in the nearby town of Angel Fire. The mountain resort is actually 75 miles northeast of the state capital, which is Santa Fe. Now, some of the wounded were transported to a hospital in Taos, New Mexico, around 25 miles away to the southwest. And as the injured were taken there, officials actually banned alcohol sales and established a curfew in that particular town. Others ended up in Denver and Albuquerque. Now, the Bandidos have been involved in at least 3 shootings in Texas and Oklahoma in the past 2 months, according to local police. Most of Main Street remained closed to the public on Sunday as part of the state police's investigation. And Red River Mayor Linda Calhoun advised local businesses to remain closed too. She said it's very tragic. It's the first time we've ever had anything like this. The shooters have all been apprehended. There's no threat to the community. Well, it's a relief, really, isn't it? But what a state of affairs. Right, okay, into our second story, and we can head to the island of Bali. Now, you may or may not have been following my updates on this over the last few weeks, but the problem out there is that the governor of Bali and the provincial government have been taking against the use of motorcycles and now cars by visitors to the island. And following a press conference on Sunday evening, the governor, Wayun Costa, took the first steps to formalise a ban on all tourists riding bikes or driving cars on the island. Now, most obviously, the ban would mean that tourists in Bali couldn't hire a moped to explore the island, which is a popular thing to do. But it seems that the policy as it stands would include resident expats as well as foreign tourists. So essentially it would ban any non-Indonesian from driving motorcycles or cars on the island, irrespective of whether they had an international or even a local driving license. Essentially you would have to be a citizen of Indonesia. So to get around, it seems that all foreigners would need to hire a private driver for all their transportation needs. Now, not surprisingly, the announcement has been received with mixed responses. Some motorcycle rental owners have urged the provincial government to rethink this ban completely. Others have asked quite reasonably how the process will actually work, noting that in many popular areas of the island, simply replacing bikes with taxis would actually trigger extreme traffic congestion. So as of now, until any further ban on the tourist driving is written into the legislation, tourists can only hire a motorcycle from a business that is registered with the relevant trade agencies of the Transportation Renting Association, and they can only rent in Bali if they have an international driving license which covers them for driving motorcycles, and also relevant insurance documents. So basically, borrowing from a friend, renting a motorcycle from a guest house owner who just happens to have a couple bikes tucked away and on the front, or from anybody else who's not a formal registered motorcycle rental company, is prohibited. And traffic police are apparently working in conjunction with tourism task forces to crack down on tourists violating the rules out there. So it's all part of a bigger island-wide commitment that they say to establish higher quality tourism in Bali. Okay, so we've got Kevin, who says, catch up later as you've got a busy morning. Nice to see you anyway, Kevin. I hope you do enjoy the show when you look back. Right, okay, so what else is going on? Well, it's not just, of course, Bali where there are injunctions on riding motorcycles. They are as close as home as Birmingham City Council and Wolverhampton. Now, what is going on here, you may be wondering? Well, it's bans on street cruising which are in place across both of those locations. The Birmingham ban was imposed via an interim High Court order at Birmingham High Court in December 2022, and along with the ban which currently covers Wolverhampton, they've just been extended following a review until a final, as yet unscheduled, hearing is held. Now, what, you may be wondering, is a street cruise? And the answer to that is actually an alarmingly wide range of activities. Now, I'll come back to this story at the end of the show, and I'll explain just how ordinary riders could unwittingly fall foul of these powers. So stay tuned to the end of the show and find out what a street cruise is. Right, now don't forget, if you do want to catch up with these shows, they go out at 11 on Wednesdays and Sundays. They're nearly always live. They are occasionally recorded. Very rarely I miss a show. And just to let you know, Sunday's show will be a recording, and hopefully I will get the time and date of that right this time. It will go out at 11, and hopefully on Sunday. You may have noticed that a previous recording went out on Monday by accident. So make sure that you make a note in the diary. But if you do miss a show, you can always catch up on Facebook or more easily on my youtube.com channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget the all-important UK on the end though, or you will find somebody sharpening horses' hooves with a Boy Scout or something similar. Right, okay, so you probably know there are a range of eye conditions which require you to notify the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency, the DVLA. However, what you may not have realised, and I have to admit here that I certainly didn't know about this, was that last year the DVLA produced a new list of notifiable conditions. It was extensive. It actually covered dozens of eye conditions. It was so extensive that the vision experts actually said that it could apply to almost every rider or driver who had ever received an eye test. Specifically, the provision meant that almost every driver or rider who wears glasses to correct eyesight whilst driving would need to report themselves to the DVLA. And it turns out that there is a pretty big penalty if you don't do that. The eyesight rules that came out in October 2022 stated that if vision was deemed to be a factor in an accident, a £1,000 fine and 3 points would be issued to that driver if the driver had not notified the DVLA of the condition prior to the incident. So even if you were driving with corrected vision, with glasses, and you had an accident, if you didn't have that eyesight registered on their list, you would be liable for a penalty. And those, even in more serious cases, a driving disqualification would not have been beyond the realms of probability, because it was one of the provisions for those offences. Now, it turns out that experts weren't consulted about the new list of conditions, and the Association of Optometrists wrote to the DVLA to express their concern about the content and the technical errors that they found in the document. The college also asked to see evidence to support the DVLA's new list of vision conditions. And to quote, "It is important to remind members that the standards of vision for driving have not changed. It is a list of notifiable conditions that has been expanded, which will result in considerable additional burden to both drivers and the DVLA." And that was part of a statement by that College of Optometrists. The DVLA have acknowledged our concerns and are looking into this as a matter of urgency. Now, it seems that the DVLA have taken that on board and are going to update their guidance on eye conditions in the coming weeks. Well, there are no details forthcoming just yet. Adam Sampson, who is the Chief Executive for the AOP, he said, "We've continued to have an open dialogue with the DVLA on this important issue to work towards a pragmatic solution for our members, patients and the DVLA. The move is sure to remove an unnecessary administrative burden for practitioners, but also to alleviate worry for many patients." And I'm not sure if the people who check your eyesight have to notify the DVLA themselves. Reading between the lines there, it looks as if they might have been required to. But the DVLA say they have reviewed the list of notifiable conditions, and they have now consulted with the Secretary of State for Transport's Medical Advisory Panel on visual disorders and driving. But you have to ask, wouldn't it have been better if they'd consulted the experts in the first place to produce some manageable legislation? Another government department not getting on top of a problem, it seems to me, but hey ho, what do I know? So, right, okay, what if you ride with a tinted visor? Well, here is some advice that you should be aware of very, very rapidly if you happen to reside in the Cheshire area. Let's just zoom in a little bit on the helmet there and show you what we're looking at. The Cheshire Police, via their Twitter feed, which is Cheshire Police Bike Cops, yes, that really is the account name. Now, they announced that they have a new device for testing dark visors out on the road. Darkened visors, we have a new testing device for motorcycle visors. The visor must allow at least 50% of natural light through. It must also be of an approved type. Look for E mark or a British Standard kite mark, and you should carry a clear visor for riding in low light conditions. Now, I'll emphasise that the law actually remains unchanged, but the team basically reported results from testing helmets and their visors, and they point out that any visor which is marked for racing use only will be non-compliant. And some examples of the light levels transmitted by these illegal visors are as follows. A Suomi Iridium, just 11.4% of light went through that, as opposed to the 50, which is the minimum requirement. The BMW System 4 Dark Smoke, that's 15% transmission. A Roof Boxer Dark Smoke, 16.2. A Roof Roadster Dark Smoke, 19.2. That dark smoke gives it away a bit, doesn't it? The following visors were tested and are legal. The Arai Light Smoke, which is kite marked, 57%. An Arai Clear, obviously kite marked and legal, 88%. Interesting that the a clear visor actually cuts out 12% of the light transmission, isn't it? A Shoei Daytime Use Light Smoke, 57%, also presumably kite marked. Now, the team point out that using an illegal visor could also impact on an insurance claim in the event of a collision. That's actually something I've got in my terms and conditions on my training courses. I've been aware of that particular issue for quite some time. So what about internal sunshades? Well, as you can see, this particular one, which is actually fitted to the police helmet, you can just see the CE of police there. You can see that the light transmission through that is 20%. So although they are legal to use behind an existing visor, the police team point out that they must only be used in daylight. If they are used at night or during what are known as the lighting up hours, when during twilight, then you may be committing an offence. And they also point out that the visor is actually clearly marked. You can see it there. I'll just zoom in on that. Daytime use only. So there you have it on the visor. That's the sort of thing you're looking for. That would be illegal to have down during night time hours. Now, just to finish this story off, Roads Policing Constable PC James Shrimpton told Motorcycle News, quote, if the visor, mostly our dedicated motorcycle police officers, notice that the visor seems not to comply with the regulations, at this point the visor would be inspected and, if necessary, tested to check for compliance. So basically, they are saying they will be pulling riders over for this. Now, the sort of place I would be thinking about being stopped might be something perhaps like Alton Park for the British Superbikes. Now, currently the penalty for a non-regulation visor is not points on the licence, it is a fixed penalty notice. It's £50, but PC Shrimpton warned that if the darkened visor was used during the hours of darkness, and he said see the highway code for what that means, then the rider may be committing a more serious offence of dangerous driving, especially if an injury collision results. So there you go. That's a warning for you if you are riding around with a dark visor for whatever reason. The police are taking an increased interest in them, and it does give them the chance to stop you for that. Terry asks, where might the law be on self-darkening photochromic prescription glasses? Good question, Terry. Best answer to that one, I think, is check with your optician. Again, as far as I am aware, that there is no rule that says the glasses that you wear behind the visor, at least in the UK, have to be of any particular standard, although it's a good idea to use shatterproof lenses for obvious reasons. For instance, the glasses that I wear behind my visor to keep pollen out of my eyes are warranted shatterproof. They come up with the right BS mark for those, so I would check with the optician in the first place. I don't know exactly what the rules are in New Zealand. I would imagine they're probably similar to the UK. Right, okay, so on with the show. What else have I got for you? Well, we'll have a look at some news about motorcycles to round off the news section. And as you probably noticed, there's been a stagnation in new models from the Japanese manufacturers, to the point where, of course, where everybody got very excited about the new Hornet, the new Transalp, the new Suzuki V-Strom and their Naked 800. But with the lack of new bikes appearing on the market, the Chinese are only too happy to fill the void. And so QJ Motor have just unveiled a brand new adventure bike for Europe. Now, it joins brands like Benelli with their popular TRK 502X. You may not be aware of that bike in the UK, but it is the best-selling big bike in Italy, apparently. I also saw a couple of them out in New Zealand. And CF Moto, they've just released their 800 MT. And now they have been joined by the QJ Motor, which looks like this. If I can actually get the right picture up, here we go. There it is. Quite an attractive looking bike, actually. Now, the SRT 700X, it will arrive tagged at just €6,999, which should, at current exchange rates, translate to around £6,200. And I'll put that into perspective. That's actually £400 cheaper than the much less powerful CB5X, which currently retails at £6,699, according to Honda's own website. What else have we got around that sort of price point? Well, the Yamaha Tracer 700, that has now reached the heady heights of £8,800 in the UK. The new Honda Transalp 750, that'll empty your wallet to no less than £9,499. Even the Kawasaki Versys, which has been around for ages and ages, is hardly a bargain at £8,349. The new Suzuki V-Strom, incidentally, looks seriously overpriced in this company at £10,499. So no wonder I haven't seen one around. Now, about the only Japanese model in this highly popular adventure bike market that's cheaper than the new QJ Motor is actually the Versys 300, and that's still £5,149. So what QJ give you cash? Well, the bike is basically around a water-cooled 6-speed 689cc parallel twin motor. It delivers around about 73 horsepower, 54 kilowatt if you prefer, at 8,000 RPM, so it's not particularly revvy. 63 Newton meters of torque at 6,000 RPM, so it should deliver pretty good drive off the throttle. The Euro 5 certified engine actually pretty much matches the Yamaha MT-07 on power output, but at lower revs. Now, the machine gets a brand new aluminium swinging arm. It rides on a 19-inch front and 17-inch rear combination. It's stopped by dual channel ABS that is Acton front 4-pot radial caliper brakes. The Venture model comes with full LED lights, a TFT panel, heated grips. The seats are actually reasonably user-friendly 785mm, which is 31 inches, which is a bit lower than some of these bikes often are. And the curb weight with 18 litre fuel on board is actually claimed to be a modest 192 kilograms, or 423 pounds. I'd like to see that one tested, actually, because that does seem particularly light. Now, I know that Chinese motorcycles are largely still distrusted by the UK bike population, but most of that prejudice honestly comes from the very poor quality 125s that first appeared 25 years ago. Now, Chinese manufacturers currently build engines for some of the top European manufacturers, and I've covered those stories here in the past. And companies like Suzuki, for example, have had their own small bikes and scooters made in China for the world market for at least 2 decades. The 125s we were using at our training school in Kent, for example, back in the early 2000s were made there. So the big question really is, with the impending death of the internal combustion engine, is there sufficient time for bikes like this to become mainstream. Comments welcome as always. Right, okay, it's time for today's discussion point, where I'll come back to the thorny question of what constitutes a street cruise. Now, as I said at the top of the show when I was talking about the ban on street cruising in Birmingham and Wolverhampton, the definition of what actually constitutes a street cruise is actually quite alarmingly wide. Street cruising is, and I quote from the regulations, a congregation of the drivers of 2 or more motor vehicles, including motorcycles, between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. on the public highway, or at any place to which the public have access within the claimant's local government area. In this case, it is the city of Birmingham and Wolverhampton. Now, there follows a list of activities which are listed, which, quote, could cause excessive noise, danger to other road users, including pedestrians, damage or the risk of damage to private property, litter. And then there is a catch-all condition, or any nuisance to any person not participating in the street cruise, which basically means anything you really want it to mean. The activities referenced above as being banned under street cruise rules would be driving or riding at excessive speeds or otherwise dangerously. So presumably if you just happen to be running along over the speed limit, that could count against you there. Racing against other motorcycles or motor vehicles. Performing stunts in or on motor vehicles. Obstructing the highway or any private property. Now, there was a video which was being hotly debated that was going to rounds of social media just a few days ago, which showed a motorcycle blocking a roundabout with traffic, trying to get round it in order to let his mates out of a side turning. So what do you make of that? Wouldn't that be obstructing the highway? And there's a second catch-all: driving or riding in convoy. Now, given that the so-called congregation of bikes that are forming a convoy could be just 2 vehicles, that essentially means that if you're out with your mate getting back late from an evening run and you've got a loud can or 2 fitted to the bikes, that could be construed as a street cruise. Chief Superintendent Ian Groom from West Midlands Police said, "Alongside our partners, we do not tolerate illegal car gatherings due to the danger and nuisance they create to communities and the wider public going about their lives." Now, I've reported in the past that powers like this have been used to break up meetings of cars who are sort of congregating at 1 o'clock in the morning and doing donuts and wheelies and things. No, you don't do a wheelie on a car, do you? But you know what I mean. Donuts and other stunts around empty car parks. But what happens if PC Plod doesn't happen to like the cut of your jib whilst you're out riding with a group of buddies? Well, here's the penalties you could face. Any driver, rider or passenger breaching the order could be arrested immediately and face up to 2 years in prison, a fine, or have their assets seized, which of course would mean in many cases your motorcycle or your car. But it's all for the public good, as Councillor Nikki Brennan, who's the Cabinet Member for Social Justice, Community Safety and Equality, told us. She or he, actually, I'm not quite sure. Street cruising is dangerous as well as being a nuisance for law-abiding citizens. By working with our partners at the police on applying this injunction, we have shown we understand and share the continued concerns raised by many residents about this antisocial and life-threatening behaviour. What bothers me most about these injunctions is their amazing breadth and their powers. Now, whilst I'm not a lawyer, it seems to me that everything about public nuisance and disorder is already covered in law. It may not specifically refer to motor vehicles, but I'm absolutely positive you could take anybody who is being disruptive to court and charge them under other rules. Now, the street cruising rules specifically target groups of riders and drivers, and whilst I'm reasonably certain that the majority of police will apply the rules very sensibly and only use them when things turn unruly, as in those sort of big gang ride-outs that we've seen on the show, there's always the danger that they could be invoked in an inappropriate situation, then it seems to me, and again I say I'm not a lawyer here, seems to me that it's down to the individuals who are arrested to prove their innocence. Now, I know we have a presumed innocent until proven guilty legal system, but read those definitions again. Riding along with another biker between the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. hours and being caught over the speed limit or with a loud pipe or both means you're already technically guilty of the offence. And it's down to you to prove that you weren't creating the kind of nuisance that these sweeping laws were designed to stop. Now, there's worse news. The interim order to review the street cruise rules may not lapse when it comes up again. Back to Councillor Brennan again, and he or she says, while the current order remains in place, I would like to see the courts take public concerns into consideration and grant a full injunction outlawing street cruises for good across our city. I honestly think that is quite an alarming development. I've talked about these street cruise rules before, but I certainly hadn't realised that they had been put in place across a city as big as Birmingham. Personally, I think that can't be good. I honestly think this is a power too far for the police. Right, so a couple of comments. Terry says, crikey, sounds like something that will jam up with the courts. Well, you know, hopefully, Terry, we won't see police abusing those powers, but the fact is that these injunctions do grant them enormous powers to, you know, disrupt all sorts of activities that bikers like to do. You know, everything from the charity run to the sort of those impromptu sort of ride outs for riders who've been killed in a bike crash. Everything like that would be under the purview of that particular rule. And Grasshopper says, hello from New Zealand, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for looking in. Right, that is it for today's show. Just a quick reminder before I go that I will be back on Sunday 11 if the scheduling goes right, because it will be a pre-recorded show because I will be away from home for a few days. So hopefully everything goes well on that, and I will sort of see you, if you see what I mean, on Sunday for the next show at 11. If not, do remember that you can catch up anytime you like on YouTube. And thank you once again for looking in today. If you are riding out here, it's not too bad a day, as I said, in London and elsewhere in the UK. We are now firmly, hopefully, into late spring, last day of spring today, and some nice weather. So if you are riding around out there, do stay shiny side up.